Okay. So I hope things are fine with the recording. And we can get started. Welcome, everyone. Today, we will have our webinar related to development cycles and phases in astrology and, of course, in our lives. Honestly, while I was preparing about our discussion, our meeting, I realized that this is really a huge topic. Pretty much everything in astrology is about cycles and phases and development. So this is not just a theme for one webinar. It could be a whole training, and it can even be like a really extensive training, because we can look at this from so many perspectives. There are so many cycles which affect us, and we can explore them. We can look into their different phases. So the topic is really huge, and we can start from a very, I would say, basic level, a level that even beginners or even people that don't understand anything about astrology would still be able to like get something from this. And we can go into like a really advanced level where basically you need to be very, very aware of astrology and different techniques in order to understand it. So we'll see how the flow will go, but I would like to start with some more general stuff that you can use even if you are not on an advanced level. But I would like to offer you after that also some ideas that if you are more experienced, you can explore on your own. Because again, this is like a huge topic. The first, I would say, simplest way to look into the cycles in our life, and before I go there, also, we can categorize the cycles according to different characteristics in different groups. For example, we may take general cycles, which are like universal for everyone. And that's how we will start today. So we will talk about ages. From this year to this year, we are in this cycle. For example, we always start with the moon cycle when we are born. Or we all have the cycles of Saturn, which are universal, or they apply to everyone. Like around the age of 29, we all have our Saturn return. So this is one way to approach it, like general cycles that don't depend on your chart, basically. They are not personalized. They are universal. There is another category of cycles which are very personal, very individual, and they are again about your natal chart. This can get more advanced. Like, for example, the moon cycle, the solar moon cycle is one example of this. It's not complicated. We can use this approach for all of the other planets. I will try to explain this idea a bit later. And we may even get to something more advanced, like the heliacal phases of the planets, which is a really advanced level. So, as I said, we have a group of general universal cycles that apply to everyone. We also have very individual, very personalized cycles, which define us from the birth chart. But then we have like a whole other level of cycles, which is related to our prediction. It doesn't matter which method you're using. I mean, it can apply to transits, it can apply to secondary progressions, the heliacal phases of the planets. For the solar return chart, maybe not so much, even though we can, anyway, obviously a huge topic. And again, it can be described on many different levels. So today I would like to give you something from each of those categories. So we'll see what we'll have at the end. But let's get started with something simple and yet very important. So one thing which I have found also is that some simple things can be so foundational and they can determine so much. And very often we kind of like miss those because we think, well, that's, you know, everyone knows that, or it's not that important. It is important. And those planetary cycles related to our age are an example for such thing. Again, basic, but foundational. According to this idea, after we were born, we all follow 7-year cycles, which trigger different planets from the visible planets. So we talk about the 7 planets from the septenary, from the Sun until Saturn. So we are starting here. When we are born, and after that, until the age of 7, we are in the moon cycle. This makes total sense if you look into this, like the moon is the energy of the children, of dependency. The most important needs are about safety, about being taken care of, and that's all related to the moon. So the way to use this overview or approach is, first of all, you can check like your age and at what cycle are you in, like in what planetary cycle you are in. And then you can also check what's the status of this planet in your natal chart. This would make it more personalized. But when we get to the age or the phase which is ruled by a certain planet, this is a time when the potential of this planet is being unfolded or unleashed. And this is also very important, especially when we get a little bit older, like the age of the Sun, Jupiter, Saturn. You will see that it gets even more interesting. So the first 7 years, this is the phase of the moon. We are dependent. We need to be taken care of. We need protection. We need nurturing. You know how moody kids are. So we are totally ruled by our moon. And again, check the status of the moon in the chart if that's about your child, for example, and you can understand more about this phase and, for example, energies that are triggered. Generally, people or kids with harmoniously positioned moon might be kind of easier. They adapt easier to the environment. You can get along with them. Of course, this is not like 100% true, but usually that's how it is. And kids with intense moon, like many challenging aspects or in a difficult sign, they could be more difficult also for, in terms of, you know, what is this? It's about being fulfilled. They can constantly need something. It might be more difficult for them to adapt or to feel loved or nurtured. They could be sometimes more nervous, let's say. It would depend on the aspects of the moon. But for the first 7 years, we really need to pay attention to the moon. Then, from the age of 7 until the age of 14, we are in the age or in the phase of Mercury. We are ruled by Mercury. And this is the time during, for most people at least, we need to learn to communicate with others outside of our closest environment, the family environment. So we need to start learning to communicate with others a little bit further away from the environment that we are aware of. For many kids, this is a time when they need to start going to school and learning, and also, most importantly, learning to think is what we need to develop during this 7-year period, and from the age of 7 until the age of 14. So on an inner level, it's about learning to learn, to process new information. On an outer level, it's connection, to communicate with other people outside of the family environment. And the same principle applies as well. If you have well-positioned Mercury, then this phase can be easier for you. You can kind of like feel more in alignment with this energy. Usually those are kids that can handle well with school, with building up friendships. Friendship is very important during this age. We learn to create friendships during this time. And on an inner level, it's learning to process information, to listen to something new and to process it internally. So from 7 to 14, we are under the major influence of Mercury. From the age of 14 until 21, we get to the phase of Venus. Usually this is the time when we fall in love or we feel attracted by someone, and we start to recognize more our desires. This is very important. Of course, we can have desires before the age of 14, but for most people, especially if they don't have like a really strong sun, for most people, the desires don't come from inside. They are more defined by the environment, by what is accepted in the family, by what other kids want, the friends. So until the age of 14, most people are not so connected to their desires. But between the age of 14 and 21, we need to, not that we need to, but that's what happens naturally. We start, first of all, connecting to others on a more emotional level. It could be romantically. And we can also recognize more what we want, what are our own desires, our own values. If you have a nice position of Venus, and again, this is like very, also it's questionable, like sometimes things are not so easy to define, like it's not just harmonious or disharmonious, there could be a mixture. But overall, if Venus is in a more harmonious position, this could be a positive time for us, a time when we can feel like we are expanding, like we feel more like ourselves. And of course, the romantic area could bring us joy. If Venus is in a problematic position or has difficult aspects or something else, this period from 14 to 21 could be more problematic. We may not feel so happy, or we may feel like something is missing, or of course it would depend on your Venus, like there could be different Venus problems. But this is the time when we need to connect to this energy and start to explore it and get to know it, Venus. The age of 21 until the age of 28. This is the time when Mars gets really activated. And you may notice how, for example, people who are, let's say, at their 15s, when they were 15 or 18 years old, maybe they didn't have so much willpower. And this may change between the age of 21 and 28. Why is that? Because Mars gets more activated between this within this time frame. And the person may become more motivated. This can be really interesting, depending on Mars status, of course, and the overall spiritual level of the person. Because this is the time when we may, during this Mars phase, we may start to separate from the environment, which is a healthy process. We may start to express our own will, to follow our own will, to follow our own desires. And people may start to behave in a very different way. They may have very different motivation, very different focuses. If we are more externally oriented, this is a time when we can get ambitious to achieve something, to compete with others, to prove something, to demonstrate something. Here, usually, of course, it would depend on how strong your Jupiter and Sun are, but usually here, we don't have such a clear goal. Of course, there are exceptions, like if someone has a very strong Jupiter energy, you might be goal-oriented from a very early age. But for most people, that's not the case. For most people during this time, it's not so much about pursuing the concrete goal as much as it is about showing that you can be more, that you can be the first one or better than others or something like that. That's in case Mars is strong. That's not for everyone. But this is very interesting. You can use it also to understand yourself better, or maybe if you have grown-up kids in this age, you can also understand them better as well. We don't always have like the goals that we would pursue until the end of our life. Because at this age, usually, again, I repeat that, the actual goal may not be so important. But the process that it activates, which is to trigger Mars energy, to find your own willpower, to separate yourself from the mass, from, from others, to prove that you can achieve things, you can go in a different direction, you can try this, you can try that. And you may notice that for most people with strong Mars, they can change their direction. They can get bored. As soon as they achieve something, they may need something else to focus on and to pursue. So this also shows us that for Mars, it's not necessarily the goal which is important as much as the process of fighting the battle, trying to achieve it. This can be much more pleasant as an experience and more important for Mars. So if you have kids, for example, who are not that consistent and they are at this age, don't worry, it's part of the process. And you can also understand if maybe this has applied to you, or maybe if you are at this age right now, if you feel like, yeah, you go in one direction, but then you get bored, or you want something different, or you change your perspective or direction, that's normal. Because at this age, again, especially if Mars is strong, the competitive spirit or proving yourself that you can do things, you can achieve things is more important. The goal is more like, how to say that, like something we use basically so that we can experience the process. After this age, from the age of 28, am I calculating it properly? Yeah, 28 until 35, yes. 28 until 35, this is the cycle of the sun. And for people who have strong sun, this is the time when it can get to some kind of, we may say, peak level. And this is the time when people start focusing more on what they want, on their desires. And here, it's not just about the competition. It's not just about pursuing something or proving that you are different, or even though the sun may want to separate also and to show that, I can create something different, but it's really through the process of creation, not so much about the competition or, some kind of battle. It's more about tapping into your own creative potential and expressing this. Of course, not everyone has such a creative potential, and also this may vary. Like there could be different levels of creativity or creative potential. But even if we don't have so much creative potential, this is the age when we can get to know ourselves better, to connect to our own identity, to who we really are, what we really want. So our individuality becomes more important. And again, if you have a strong sun, like this could be a moment when you can really be able to express your potential. One thing I want to clarify also, after we pass certain phase, so let's say we pass the sun phase and we move to the next one, which is Jupiter's phase, we are not losing the previous qualities. So it's not that, you have this window of opportunity between 28 and 35, you need to, find your sun energy and do the best you can, because otherwise the door is closed. That's not how it works. That's a principle which applies to every cycle of development in astrology, in every phase. We are just building up more things on top of the previous ones. So we are not losing the previous experience. So again, between the age of 28 and 35, it's great if you have this awareness, by the way, that you need to really focus on your sun. If you understand astrology, you can check the status of your sun, look at aspects, positions, like configurations, and you may understand, okay, like now I can develop more of this or that. But it doesn't mean that after that you lose this. It's just that usually when we are in some phase, planetary phase, this is the time when we can get to a really high level of this energy. So the sun energy is, the sun phase is really, really important. And the particular age, which is called like the sun age, is the age of 33. This is the age when Christ have died, and this is also based on the fact that the sun cycle is 11 years. So every 11 years, something within the sun is getting triggered, but specifically the age of 33 is considered to be the sun age. So for many people, this can also be a pivotal age. I just remembered something. I'm writing it down so I don't forget in the moment. After the sun, we get to Jupiter. From 35 until 42 is the age of Jupiter. And this is a time when we can really achieve some significant success. Obviously, it doesn't mean that before that you can't be successful. There are many people who get successful. Well, I'm not sure if there are many, but there are people who get successful under the age of 30 or at any other age. At the age of 80 is also possible. But Jupiter's phase, so 35 to 42, is a time when we can really expand. Especially if we were able to kind of like build up the previous layers. So our desires, Venus, then learning to achieve what we want. It's not a coincidence that Mars follows Venus, because Mars doesn't have a clear goal on its own. Mars is like a soldier. The soldier needs directions, orders. You go there, you fight for this, you need to achieve this. So Mars always needs a trigger from another planet. It could be Venus, it could be the Sun, it could be Jupiter, but Mars needs to be pushed or motivated by another planet. So Venus is about our personal desires. That's why first we need to know what we want, what our values are, and then Mars will have like a possible focus. So if we can recognize our desires, we learn how to pursue them, how to take action. Yes, we might be more inconsistent, but that's not so important. Then we need to recognize, to learn to recognize our identity, who we really are, our creative potential, our individuality. Also very important to learn to do things for us, not because of other people, not to prove something, but because we want it, because we have an impulse from inside. Then we get to this phase of the highest level of expansion, we can say. The time when, again, people may achieve some significant success. It's about larger scale. It's about doing things in bigger scale. And this age between 35 and 42 is actually extremely interesting. In a moment when we get to the other cycle, you will understand why this is really like a very important age for many people. And we all have very different experiences. It doesn't mean that it's equal for everyone. So the main topic is expansion, success. And the last phase, between the age of 42 and 49, this is the phase of Saturn. This is a time when we need to reconsider many things in our lives. And for some people, especially if you have missed the Sun and the Jupiter phases, I mean, if you haven't connected to what you really want, your desires, your creativity, if you didn't have the time, not the time, it could be the opportunity, it could be the focus, it could be taking the risk to expand during the Jupiter phase. Then when we get to Saturn, we can get disappointed during this age, because usually around this age, we may start to notice that time is passing. The first time we usually recognize this is around the age of 29. But I think the more intense time is during this phase, 42 until 49. And we are making a real assessment. And we usually become more aware of how things really are. It is also possible that we can achieve some stable results. So Saturn is not a bad planet. Saturn is not a negative planet. Saturn is really needed here on the Earth because it's the planet which allows us to put things into a form, into a concrete form. So any idea that you want to materialize needs Saturn to turn into something concrete. So if you have learned this, if you have this skill to put things into a material form, and if you have this desire, of course, this can be also a very successful time for you. And it would depend on your Saturn, the way Saturn is positioned in your chart as well. What did I want to say also? I had something about Saturn. Yes. Also, after this age, Saturn has a very different influence on us after we pass this phase, 42 until 49. So very often for people, let's say, who have some relationship problems related to Saturn or triggered by Saturn, after this age, your problems may change or they may even be resolved. So I have seen this in the horoscopes of women, but it should work the same way for men as well. After this age, people may have more stable relationships, and generally Saturn works in a different way. Saturn is not that restrictive after the age of 49. What happens next after that? After that, we actually have kind of unlocked the potential of our chart, or at least the visible planets. So from the Sun to Saturn. I'm saying this in the order of the solar system, not how they go in our lifetime. So after the age of 49, first we have the opportunity to be more complete, or potentially even wise for some of us, not for everyone, of course, but yeah, we can be wiser. And after this time, we can also, not everyone, but for some people, it might be possible also to connect more to the outer planets and to use them constructively. Again, this doesn't apply to everyone because not everyone has such focus. But for some people, it can be a time of incredible creativity, incredible freedom. It would really depend on also if you are living only in the Saturn world, so only in the material world, or you have a focus in something else, something beyond. Objectively, realistically, how things really are. For people who live only in the material reality, only in the world of forms, for them, first of all, the process of maturing or aging is usually very difficult. And also after Saturn, so after the age of 49, and especially after the second Saturn return, which is around 56, 58, people feel like their life is over, like they don't have motivation, they don't like their bodies, they don't like the process of aging, and they may lose meaning. So for those people, aging is more difficult. It's subjectively true. For people who have other interests, and honestly, this word like spiritual interest is a little bit overused, I think, but I can't find a better word. So, and it's very general, obviously, but for people who have some kind of spiritual interest, or they want to achieve or explore something beyond, it doesn't mean that you need to want to go like to a monastery, or I don't know, to isolate yourself, or to study something particular, or to meditate all day. No, you may have an interest, for example, in philosophy or some other knowledge, or of course astrology, or anything which explores some kind of essence. So something which is not visible, something that you can't necessarily touch or cut with the knife, or you can explore it with your mind, or you can feel it. So if the person has such focus, for them, after this age, so after the Saturn cycles, so Saturn age again ends at the age of 49, and especially after the second Saturn return, 56, 58, after that, for them, this could be a time of liberation and freedom. And many people retire around this age. Of course, it depends on the country, the culture, and it's changing, but many people retire around this age. For some of them, they feel like they're losing meaning, they are useless, or they don't have motivation, they just feel like how they are aging. Those are the people who live only in the material world, or the world of forms. But if you have passed Saturn, if you have other interests, this is actually a time of incredible freedom. You have time, your kids are usually grown up at this age, you can hopefully provide for yourself, you have some savings, or how is that called, insurances or something. So for many people, this can actually be a time of incredible freedom. But again, it would depend very much on our interests and also our spiritual level. The spiritual level is something extremely interesting. And again, this is not just a topic for one session. This can be like a whole training. So I won't be going much into this direction. But I want to share with you like a new project, something new which I'm offering to people. This is the new project, which is called Astro Evolutionary Pathways. And it's a very in-depth personal study of your chart, which begins with rectification of your time. It's obligatory to have a very accurate time of birth for this analysis. And it includes exploration of your spiritual level. What do you need to focus on? Like, what is the next stage of development for you? What do you need to focus on? And generally the path of evolution, first in your natal chart. Evolution in terms of your development, where is your growth? What do you need to learn? What is your direction? And not only on a spiritual level. So my point, my goal is to combine the spiritual and the practical. I have a stellium in Capricorn and another one in Pisces. So I have this difficult inner task to find the bridge between those energies. And even though they are in sextile, they are not easy to fulfill at the same time. But it can be incredibly rewarding when we can. And frankly, like that's my understanding of what is our purpose here. Like, yes, we are spiritual creatures. We need to recognize this. We need to develop this part of us. But then we also need to engage with reality and do things here in the outside world. So in this study, that's what I'm trying to do, to show you how to bridge those, or what is your own task. And also we talk about a 10-year, so 1 decade in perspective. And it's not about predicting events. It's not about, oh, you will get married, you will have a child, or you will get a home. It's not about that. It's about your evolution and your inner growth. And major focus is both internally and externally. So this would be like 1.5 hours up to 2 hours recorded analysis. And also after that, you will have like a 30-minute follow-up live session on Zoom if you have questions, if you want some clarification. So if you are interested in this, you can go to my website, marsstars.net. The section was consultations, I think. And I will send an email later if you are interested in such type of exploration or work. But the point is that all of those phases, spiritual levels, they define everything. And a little personal share here, why I got so interested into this topic. I have always been interested in development, in growth, what is our direction. And here I also want to add something. This is not about some kind of fake positivity that, we all should achieve this, or that we should all have this goal for kind of like universal success. For everyone's success or their personal task is completely different. So, but I got through an interesting cycle or phase myself. My progressed moon just got to my ascendant. So this is the beginning of a new cycle for me. And this is something that happens once in 28 years. And within the past 2.5, 3 years, the progressed moon was in my 12th house. So I have very fresh memories of what it means to feel like something is ending, like something is literally, you know, and it's something internal. Yes, on an outer level also, some things ended for me externally. But this is like an incredible journey. And okay, I will talk about this now. I plan to talk about it later, but that's how the conversation is flowing. You can explore this in your, of course, the progressions are extremely interesting, but you can even do this with your transits. You can check, for example, if there is a planet which is triggering your 12th house, and maybe I will do another workshop specifically about 12th house. I know it's, first, many people with spiritual interests have an active, strong 12th house. I also know that there are many questions about this. It's kind of a mystery house, 12th house. But anytime a progressed planet or transiting planet gets to your 12th house, you are finishing a cycle. How long the cycle is would depend on the planet. As I told you, with the progressed moon, this is 28 years. With the transit Saturn, it would be pretty much the same, 29 approximately. With Jupiter, it will be 12 years. With Uranus, it's 84. So, but when you have a planet moving from your 12th house to your first house, this is like a renewal. And again, I can tell you like my very fresh experiences and memories. When I also need to clarify that the moon is ruling my ascendant. So for me, the moon is even more important. But in everyone's chart, the progressed moon plays a major role. And it's very important to explore it. You know, 12th house, it's like meeting yourself, being on your own, staying on your own, and meeting yourself. This is the time when we can get really detached from the outside world, and it's a necessary phase. And you may feel like you are losing things. I can even share with you something even more personal. For me, this was a very specific phase in terms of my own connection with astrology, which is basically my whole life. And, you know, like the biggest love, the biggest passion. This was a time when also my relationship with astrology changed. Like, I felt like I'm not so connected to this. I haven't stopped working. I haven't stopped enjoying this, but something changed. Something really, really changed. And again, it's a necessary phase because you need to stay on your own with yourself. But when the planet gets to your ascendant, you can reconnect with something important. And I'm currently experiencing this. Like, my love for astrology is being like reborn. And this is an indication that, you know, if you have some kind of doubt or something changes while your 12th house is very active, so while you are at the end of certain cycle, this is also like a test And after that, if this was initially important and it really has a place in your life, it will be reborn. You are not losing it forever. If it goes away, if you really lose it, then it's no longer meant to be in your life. So 12th house, or the end of each cycle, each phase, is a time when we may feel disconnected from the outside world. We need to make some reassessments. And then when the planet gets to the ascendant, or we get the full return, let's say about Saturn or the progressed moon, you are like being reborn. So it's like, yeah, extremely interesting. Let me go back a little bit to our universal cycles, which are the other cycles, which are, again, generally very important for everyone. The Jupiter and Saturn cycle are very simple to calculate, so very easy. And they also play this major role. Jupiter's cycle is 12 years. So it takes 12 years for Jupiter to cross the whole zodiac, so the 36 degrees, which means that around the age of 12, we have our first Jupiter return, then the age of 24, then 36, then 48, and so on. Those are also very, very important years, and years when we can grow, we can finish some kind of growing phase and move on to the other one. The age of 12 is usually we are really young. For some people or kids, this is the time when they can change schools or something like that, or they may have some achievements. 24 might be the time you graduate, or you get your first success in terms of some kind of knowledge or expertise that you have. But the age of 36 is usually even more interesting, because during the previous ones, 12 and 24, we are also very young. So for many of us, we are not that, aware of what we want, or it might be too early to have some significant success. But 36, usually we are more mature around this age. Plus, this is also the age of Jupiter. As we said, the age of Jupiter is between 35 and 42. So when we get our third Jupiter return around the age of 36, we are also in the Jupiter phase. And this double indication is actually very positive. This can be a time when we can grow, we can succeed, or also another thing, if we are not following our path, we can go through some kind of crisis. This is also possible, but this can motivate us to make important changes and to go in another direction where we would feel like we would grow or expand, or we would learn something meaningful. So 36 is a really important age from this perspective. The ages may vary a little bit, like some months or up to a year, because of the retrograde motion of the planets. So you can also check this, but approximately the age of 36. Plus, if we need to be precise, what was the Jupiter cycle was not exactly 12 years. It was 11 years and something. I honestly forgot how many months, like 8 months or something. So it may vary a little bit, but approximately the age of 36. Something specific. If Jupiter is retrograde in the natal chart, generally my perspective is that social and outer planets which are retrograde, so Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, if they are retrograde, this is not a negative indication. And it's not that important because many people have this. Pluto is retrograde around 5.5 months per year. So almost half of the year, Pluto is retrograde, which means that almost half of the people have Pluto retrograde. So it's not such a big deal. It's not that specific. For example, Mars retrograde or Venus retrograde is much more important. By the way, I totally forgot. But speaking of Venus, we are also having Venus retrograde this summer. So yeah, we will talk about this probably in another meeting. But if you want to join our webinar on Venus retrograde, you are more than welcome to do that, because this cycle will be really interesting. So if Venus or Mars are retrograde in your chart, and that's much more significant. But Jupiter retrograde, that's not a negative indication. But there might be some kind of delay. And for those people, it's possible that the next cycle, so the age of 48, might be more significant than 36. There could be a little delay. Again, this is not like set in stone 100% rule, but you can just know that, keep it in mind that it might be the case. And every other age, every next age or Jupiter's return is also a time when we can succeed, when we can move to another level of some kind of inner and also outer growth. Okay, let's talk about the next important thing, the phases of the lunar nodes. Also, we might say, well, we might say that they are at the top, like the top in terms of importance. The cycle of the lunar nodes is 18 years and a half. And the first return is when we are 18 and a half. The second one is around 36, 37. With the nodes, also usually the first return is, yeah, we are supposed to decide usually at this age, what are we going to do? Are we going to work or study something? Or this is usually the time, approximately the time when we finish school and we are supposed to define our next direction. Or usually it sounds like our general direction in life, like deciding what your profession will be, is basically what you're going to do with your life. So pretty big decision. We are not always aware what we really want, and many people may change their mind later. But the second return is usually more interesting, the age of 37, 36, 37. First of all, it overlaps with the third Jupiter cycle. That's for one. So we can make more important changes at this point. But there is another reason also. I think at this age, 36, 37, we have passed the phase of the sun. So usually we get to know ourselves better until this age. At the age of 18, 19, most people, basically we are kids, like, let's be honest, 18-year-old, like, I don't want to sound like an old lady, but when I look at them, they're kids. So it's difficult to make like long-term wise decisions and you to stick to them until the end of your life. And especially nowadays when everything gets more and more dynamic. So yeah, usually things are not so defined. But by the age of 36, 37, we are supposed to have learned some lessons, to know ourselves better. Maybe we have tried something has worked, something didn't work. We know what our desires are. And there are a few options. What happens? We can either get to some kind of pivotal point in our life. And for some people, this may even look like succeeding in something or getting to some important position. For others, this could be a turning point, because it's possible that we may realize that this is not where we want to continue. This is not what we are supposed to do. And we may kind of like make a turn or take a turn. How do you say that? So until this age, we are supposed to figure out more things about ourselves and our direction. And of course, this is, again, a very deep topic about the lunar nodes, about our task, what we should work on. Until this time, we are supposed to have at least started working on our nodes. If we haven't worked on our nodes by the age of 18, 19, it's fine. We kind of like, we don't get harsh lessons for that. But if by the second lunar return, we are completely stuck on our south node, and the south node is the past, then this could be a more difficult time. And we might be kicked somehow and a little bit forced by the environment or something, which can push us to focus more on our north node. So around this age, it's very important to shift your focus towards the future, basically, towards your north node. Jupiter is also about the future. Jupiter is not just, expansion, bigger scale, growing, developing, succeeding, but it's the planet, one of the planets related to the future. So at this age, we need to think about our future and our development and all of that. The third lunar return, let me just do the math. So 37 plus 18, what is that? Around 56? Is that how it is? 37 plus 55, 56. A little bit, well, almost together with the second Saturn return. So it's interesting, like the second lunar return overlaps with Jupiter's cycle and phase. The third lunar return overlaps with the Saturn cycle. So we can also make some conclusions based on that. This is also a time when you can shift your priorities again, one more time. Or you can realize that you want something different, you want something new. If we are resisting to learn something, to grow, to develop, this could be a time of difficult lessons as well. Also, what may happen. So those are the Jupiter and the lunar cycles. Of course, there is one after that, but I mean, and maybe more, hopefully. We will live more and more. But the principle is that every time there should be some kind of shift and refocus. But again, the most important about the lunar nodes is the second one, 36, 37. Next is Saturn. Saturn's return is, the first one is when we are 29, 30. For many people, this age is also specific. Personally, because I'm a Capricorn and I also have 3 planets in Capricorn, for me, this wasn't a difficult age, honestly. Like, but they say that Capricorns, their whole life is ruled by Saturn. So your whole life is like a Saturn return. So how can you make the difference? Of course, it's a joke, but there is some truth in this as well. So for me, this was not a difficult age. Plus, they say that also for people who have strong Saturn or more Capricorn energy, the more they age, the better they feel. I can agree with that from my personal experience also. But objectively, for many people, this is the time when we start asking ourselves the first serious questions, like, what have I done? If you have focused on your career, you may think, but what about my personal life? Or the other way around. If you have focused on your personal life, you may say, but what about my career? Or what about my purpose? Or what about myself? Or who knows? So we can make some kind of reassessment at around this age. And of course, the way we would feel about it would depend on what we have done previously and also on our Saturn, our relationship with Saturn in general. But people may also refocus or, also for who this age might be very difficult, for people who have lots of illusions. Especially illusions about, let's say, really fast or easy success or something else similar to that. Saturn can kind of like bring us back to Earth. So if we are too much of dreamers, fantasizers, living in our world of illusions, this could be the time when, reality may knock on your door and you may need to realize that things require more work, or there could be some kind of restrictions that we may go through. But again, for people with strong Saturn, usually after that, things get easier. And also for people with Capricorn energy. Until the first Saturn return, almost for everyone. I don't want to say 100% because nothing is ever 100%, but in general, until the first Saturn return, Saturn has a very restrictive influence. So the area which is ruled by your Saturn can feel better or can expand more after this first Saturn return. Or you can make a reassessment around this time. You may realize that you want something different. That's why, for example, if Saturn is connected somehow to your relationships, the house of marriage or something like that, early marriage is not a good idea. You may either feel disappointed later, you may reassess things around the age of usually the first Saturn return, or you may separate and divorce. Again, I can bring myself as an example for all of that. Saturn is ruling my 7th house, and I got married early, very young, and I got divorced soon after that. So, but Saturn is also in conjunction with Uranus, so it's pretty much clear that there will be such a scenario, plus other indications as well. So Saturn's influence really changes after the first return. And there is also I don't really like using this expression karmic astrology because everything is karmic, but let's use it now. From a karmic perspective, it's considered that during the first Saturn cycle, so the first 29, 30 years of our lives are somehow more related to our past. We may call this past lives, we may call this, I don't know, old lessons, something like that. The second cycle, from 29 until 58 approximately, is the present. So this life, here and now. And the third one, and after that, so after the age of 58, is more about the future. So something that potentially we may keep developing in future lives, or who knows, in our future development, spiritually and in other levels and ways. So usually people with strong Saturn, during the first 29 years, they may feel like they're stuck, like they're not moving, like this is also a very common situation. But the second cycle changes things. And the next change, as I said previously, is around the cycle, around the phase. So the age of 42 until 49. Saturn is changing its influence one more time and usually becomes even less restrictive. So, yeah, something to look for. Of course, it doesn't mean that before that, we should just wait or give up. Absolutely not. One of the best things, no, it's the best thing about Saturn, is that Saturn is very fair. And the truth is that if you have worked on something, in other words, if you have deserved it, Saturn will bring you more than Jupiter. Jupiter is the planet of success, prosperity, abundance. But if we haven't worked for this, if we don't deserve it, it could be temporary. And I suspect that it might be temporary because we don't value it and we kind of waste it. Not that it's Jupiter that takes away something from us. It's never Jupiter or Saturn. It's always us, of course. But I think that it's like just an inner pattern. That if it comes too easy, or, you don't value it, you don't appreciate it. So Jupiter's success sometimes also can be temporary. But Saturn, if Saturn brings you something, this could be long-term, this could be stable, consistent, and usually you will appreciate it more. And it can be bigger, more important, more significant than Jupiter. So another reminder that Saturn is not a bad planet and we shouldn't be afraid of Saturn. Said the Capricorn. But yeah, it's really how it is. Saturn is much needed. Okay. I won't go, let me see, because we have already talked for more than an hour. I won't talk about outer planets because that's a whole other, also long topic. I want to give you something about the prediction part. Let me just see. What would be most appropriate? Okay, one actually, probably my favorite. The lunar cycle in progressions. Yeah, I told you, like, this is a huge topic. I will get a little distracted in another direction. We may even explore the signs as a cycle, because it is a cycle. starting from Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and so on until we get to Pisces, as well as the houses, first, second, and so on until 12th house. That's also a cycle of development. So everything is the cycle. But yeah, maybe another time I will show you also some other interesting cycles in the natal chart, which are more about the personal stuff. Yeah, it really is a huge topic. Like, I'm trying to summarize it and but it's just not for one session. So probably there will be another part of this. About the progressions. Progressions, I think from the very beginning, have always been my favorite method for prediction, because they really show our development. And it's not just about, external events or predicting concrete things. Most importantly, it's about you and your own growth. Yes, of course, it shows you the dynamic in the outside world as well, how you relate to different life areas. But the most important is what's happening inside of us. And the progressions are a great way to explore this. They are deeper than the transits. And one of the most interesting is the solar lunar cycle in progressions. This cycle is, as duration, is close to the Saturn cycle. So also approximately 28 years, 30 years. But this defines really your major focuses. The progressed new moons, the progressed full moons, those are like key phases of our life. When something new begins, this is the new moon. When we get to the culmination, this is the full moon. But also, we can divide the cycle into 4 main phases. So 4 phases of 90 degrees. And each of those phases is also bringing a different focus for us. And especially if you want to see the bigger picture of your life. Again, not in terms of predicting like, oh, you will get married, or oh, you will get this trouble or not. It's not about that. It's about something much deeper. And for me, much more important. Look into this. Your progressed new moons, your progressed full moons, and the different phases. I have a very, really favorite example. Maybe we can talk about this another time. I will write it down. We may talk about this because, again, it's not for 5 minutes or even an hour. So if you want, we can do a second part of this and continue with more about the predictive stuff. Okay, now I'm here for your questions, actually. If you have a question about anything I talked about, you are welcome to ask your questions. Let me see your comments also. Leo is saying my sun is turning 8 this July, moon in Scorpio. Yeah, the moon in Scorpio is pretty tense. 12th house, Capricorn stellium, with Saturn on the ascendant. Very interesting. Yeah, I have read your chart. Yeah, 12th house is very, very interesting. What do you mean? Are you finished with Libra? It's a Mintra. Okay, so while I'm waiting, if you have any questions. Yeah, I want to invite you again to join me 2 weeks from now. So on the 8th of July, we are having the Venus Retrograde webinar, which includes also 2 webinars on Lilith. And I'm offering this as a package because Venus retrograde will make conjunction with Lilith. And this will be, for me, like one of the top themes of this cycle. So very interesting, both socially for the collective, how this will work, but also personally, especially if you have one of those topics in your chart, or if you have Leo energy, or for everyone, it will have some kind of impact for sure. So if you are interested, you are welcome to join us. You are asking about the 8-year Venus retrograde cycles. I haven't talked about this. This is about the transit situation. Yeah, the cycles which I was referring to are on a personal level, not so much the mundane astrology or the collective influence. So, I mean, this is another thing, but you can check what you have been through 8 years ago, because every 8 years, Venus is retrograde in the same sign. So Venus is retrograde once in 18 months, but in different signs. But the cycle develops in such a way or rhythm, or I don't know how to call it exactly, that every 8 years, Venus is retrograde in the same sign. I can share from a personal experience. The previous time, so the last time Venus was retrograde, it must have been, well, so now we are 23, so around the beginning of 22, the end of 21, beginning of 22, Venus was retrograde in Capricorn. And I have clear memories also about what happened 8 years before that, when Venus was retrograde in Capricorn as well. And I can confirm from my experience that there were very similar topics. I would say even, yeah, similar experiences and all of that. So, but I'm a Capricorn. So for me, this was like a pretty big deal. It happened that also in my solar returns, which is like your chart for the whole year, I had Venus retrograde in Capricorn. So for me, it was very noticeable and I was able to feel it. And it had like a more significant impact on me than for most people. I will observe now how things will be for me with Venus in Leo. But you can totally check this, what has happened 8 years ago. It doesn't mean it will be the same, but the topics might be relevant somehow. So, yeah. Jenny, I have 2 Scorpio moon suns and I'm a Scorpio moon too. Lots of emotions at the same place. I can't do like personal readings now because honestly, I need to see the whole chart. So I can't interpret anything just from a piece of information. Okay. So thank you also for joining me. Again, if you are interested in this topic, there will be more to come for sure. We'll see. Like, if you have a particular question related to this, you can also send me your questions, by the way. On the website somewhere, there was a form, or on our Telegram chat, you can also post a question, especially if it's related to development, evolutionary astrology, spiritual astrology. This is a very interesting topic for me. And if you are interested in this type of comprehensive personal study, the Astro evolutionary pathways, you can also check this out. So thank you so much. The Telegram group, yes, I can include it. I'm not sure if I can. Let me try if I can post it now in the comments. I will see if I can get it from my computer. I think it will work. Yes, it worked. So you can just click on this if you want to save it, or maybe even join the group right away. The group is very convenient because you will get notifications, reminders, recordings there, everything. So thank you all also.